Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of the Live Your Jam podcast. I'm Ellen McGinnis, your host. And today I'm going to talk about the roles that women play and how we have a superpower and how that superpower works for us and also can hinder us, and how we can take it and turn it around to live our jam and make that superpower work for us. So I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to talk about women. We are awesome. Women are the best. We're moms, we're sisters, aunts, friends, nurturers, cheerleaders, getter-doners. And statistically, we show up to care for others in profound ways. I'm going to give you some stats here on women, and they're going to come as no surprise. Women make up the large majority of workers in care-oriented professions, from nursing and healthcare to teaching and educational support roles. About 77% of workers in the healthcare system and social assistance system are women. More than 80% are home health and professional care aides. My mother is going to be 97, which is amazing, in February. And she has been bedridden for the last 2 years. And for a big portion of that, she was at her house. And we had home caregivers coming in for a year. 2 were men. One was a male nurse and one was a CNA. And there were probably 50 total that came through the door. And only 2 were men. So we know that women are the ones that are taking care of our elderly and our young and our families. They're also the majority of teaching assistants too in the educational system. So beyond paid work, women are far more likely to take on unpaid caregiving for children, aging parents, and family members. I'm sure all of us know women who are taking care of their parents or children or other family members. We show up, we nurture, we support, and we carry. But there's another side to this, something quieter, less talked about. And that's something that happens inside the woman doing all the care. And I want to get into that. I mean, we are the glue. I call it the glue role. And I want to talk about all of us, we women who hold everything together for everybody else. So women become the glue in their families, their communities, and workplaces. We're organizers. We're the emotional anchors, the ones who anticipate needs before they're spoken. And at Live Your Jam, the goal is to help people live from the inside out. And I've got a process that I think can do that for people. I know it can because it's done it for me. So how do you let your inner wisdom lead? And the truth is that there are many socially acceptable roles that women get pegged into, and it makes it very difficult for us to step out of those social roles. And there's a lot of judgment when women do step out of those social roles. I mean, we're expected to be nurturers and caring and giving. So it can feel like swimming upstream, especially when society rewards us for staying in roles that are familiar, accepted, and conditioned. So the pattern is so normalized that we often don't see it. We're exhausted and disconnected or quietly wondering, after years of taking care of others, I've had many women say to me, and I can reflect on this myself, where did I go? How did I get here? And for the love of God, is there a way out? And yeah, there is a way out. We can get out of this. So this episode isn't about blame. It's not about partners doing the wrong thing or even women doing something wrong. It's about understanding the pattern and learning how to listen inward, setting boundaries and living in a way that actually works for you, not just everyone else. And if you've ever felt responsible for everybody else's well-being, except for your own, or maybe your own well-being came third, second, or fourth, this conversation is for you. I'm going to speak through the lens of motherhood because it's what I know. And I think a lot of people it's the role of the nurturer, the archetype of the nurturer. But this can apply to many women who are in caregiving positions. There's a natural selflessness that comes with motherhood and caregiving. When you become a mother, your center of gravity shifts. You're no longer the center of your own universe. And that's not wrong. It's instinctual. It is human. That selflessness isn't a flaw, it's necessary. And our babies depend on us for survival. Our children depend on us. I remember when we took my son Wyatt home from the hospital, We got into the car and I was really asking my ex-husband, demanding that he drove no faster than 15 miles an hour. I mean, I remember really being like panicked about that. And many mothers can attest to this. So our hormones, the whole process of motherhood keeps us really protective, the mama bear. And this has to happen. We have to make sacrifices. They cannot live without us. And so for the formative years and many years, we are selfless, and that needs to happen. But after a while, and for many women, myself included, somewhere along the way, the line gets blurred. And the devotion that we feel to our families can turn into a disappearance of ourselves. And that blurring shows up in so many roles that women carry without even naming it. And we get really used to it. Then all of a sudden, that's who we are. We're the person that takes care of everybody else first. So I'm going to talk about two different types of labor that women have. And these have been heard of before, but I want to talk about them because these two different invisible labors are part of the skill that we have that we've learned. So the first invisible labor is emotional labor. You know, women hold the emotional tone at work, in relationships, at home, not because we're asked to, but because we have learned to. And this particular type of woman, myself included, and if you're listening, it's probably a good chance that it's you too, remembers everything and anticipates the needs of others and keeps things moving along. We notice when things feel off before anyone else does. We know when the kids are going to get hungry. We buffer, we anticipate, adjust. We carry the unspoken so that others can stay comfortable. And this is emotional labor. The definition and concept was first introduced by a sociologist named Arlie Hochschild in 1983 in her book called The Managed Heart. Originally, she was really studying paid workers, specifically flight attendants. And what she learned in that is that flight attendants were required to manage emotions as a part of their job, not only their own emotions, but the emotions of their passengers. And I'm going to just give a shout out to my friend Gretchen, who's a flight attendant and one of the most even-keeled people in the world. Like, she is a great example of somebody who can really manage emotions and still make it look super easy. So shout out Gretch. But over time, the meaning of emotional labor expanded, and it just wasn't what women, in that case, were doing for pay. It was the unpaid, invisible work of managing emotions, relationships, atmospheres, and expectations, especially in family systems. I have so many friends who are the glue of their entire family and everybody goes to for everything. And it's good, but we're going to talk about when it's not so good. So the second piece is mental labor. And I want to say that I called it the operating system. I was the operating system of our family. Like many women, I remembered birthdays, appointments, school deadlines, medications, teachers' names, social dynamics, and conversations that still needed to happen. I knew the sitter's number. I knew the sitter's mother's number in case I couldn't get a hold of the sitter. I mean, you name it. Ladies, we all know about this. It wasn't because I was controlling. It's because, I cared, obviously. It needed to get done. But if I didn't do it, it wasn't going to get done. So and I had the added, I was self-employed. We agreed to that. So I often would trick myself and say, well, because I have more flexibility, I can do it. When the truth was that managing a household was another full-time job, and actually more than a full-time job, as many of us knows. I've worked many demanding professional roles, and I've managed a household with children, animals, schedules, and emotional needs. And the household work was far more consuming because you never clock out. And when you're indispensable, you really don't get to rest. So this is what happens with the emotional labor is there's emotional labor and invisible labor. And we learned this early on. I also just want to share one statistic on the emotional labor side. Physician and author Gabor Mate often points out that 80% of the autoimmune diseases occur in women. And he connects this not just to biology, but to the chronic stress and emotional suppression, especially the habit of putting others' needs ahead of one's own. I say women are the emotional sponge. And there was many nights, and I know many women can relate to this again, where if there was something stressful for my children, I would be up at night thinking about it, whether it was a disappointment or maybe they were having a tough time. I would take that on emotionally. And, I think most women can attest to we're up fretting these kind of things and their partners and snoring away, seemingly getting a great night's sleep. So, like I said, I talked about the emotional labor, the cost of that can be autoimmune disease. I just want to share, I was on that path myself when in 2018 I had in 1 year only. And I do remember this as one of the most stressful years of my life in terms of just not resting. I mean, the kids were around 8, 9, and 10 years old. And, most of us, when we do it for like a decade, it was around that decade time I'd been doing all of this. And I had shingles in that year. I also was diagnosed with ulcerative proctitis, which is the beginning stage of ulcerative colitis, which is an autoimmune disease. And when the gastroenterologist, when I talked to him about it, he's like, what it seems like to me is that yours is caused by stress, and it can be caused by stress. There can be other hereditary conditions, but that didn't seem to be the issue. So I was, headed there. I was on the precipice of it myself. And I think by the time I got to Switzerland, I was just so tired, and luckily our situation was different there. I had to work very little. Our agreement was that I was in charge of really just the house, and I only worked like 9 to 10 hours a week. It was a very good situation for me. And I hiked all the time and was out in nature. And I was meeting new people who were interesting. So I really changed up my life, and I knew my stress level was down. I wasn't short. I was always happy, and so I could feel my stress levels down. And when I was retested, they were saying, it's all gone. Mental labor, back to the conversation, and emotional labor are two of the pieces. The mother's mind is always a few steps ahead, scanning for what's needed next. And this isn't martyrdom. It's called attunement. We're actually attuning into others' needs, others' emotions, others' thoughts, what's going to happen next, the emotional and mental toil. It's constant work. And we become so practiced at anticipating needs that we even stop waiting to be asked. And, here's the key. This skill of attunement didn't come out of nowhere. For many women, attunement isn't something that we learned as adults. It's something we learned very early. Growing up, girls are praised for noticing when someone's upset, for adjusting their behavior to keep the peace. Girls are more likely to be rewarded for being kind and helpful, being emotionally aware, maintaining harmony. And by adolescence, many girls have learned that connection equals safety, belonging, and worth. This has all been proven. There's a developmental psychologist by the name of Carol Gilligan, and she observed that girls are socialized to understand themselves through relationships, while boys are more often encouraged towards autonomy and achievement. And yes, for you science buffs out there, there are biological differences, of course. Earlier brain maturation occurs in girls, and there are hormonal influences. But the research consistently shows that socialization is the biggest driver. So what begins as relational awareness in childhood often becomes emotional and mental labor in adulthood. And so we women have learned this, particularly in the United States. So girls who learn early on in life to read the room grow into women who feel responsible for it. I was just hearing a woman talk about women in Christmas time, and she said the magic of Christmas is women. All of those special touches, the food, the planning, the presents, all of it is women. Women are the magic of Christmas. And it's true. And I think women love it. And they love to create that joy for others. I heard in Ireland that in January, they have a day that's just for the mother, that is Christmas for moms. I don't know if that's true or not, but if anybody's listening from Ireland or knows about that tradition, please let me know. But again, these are all of the ways that women kind of show up, and that relational emphasis on everybody else's needs. So this is really our superpower, attunement, attuning into energy and what needs to get done, and emotions, and the mental piece of thinking 10 steps ahead. But this superpower does have its cost, especially when it's one unidirectional or one going in one way, always outward. Because the body will eventually speak, as as I quoted with Mate's statistics on autoimmune diseases and women kind of owning those diseases. Nothing about this is broken, but it does require conscious choice and boundaries. I think this is the really important piece. How do we use this attunement for ourselves? So the same attunement that you spent your life using for others can be turned inward. That same sensitivity, awareness, the same empathy. And I can tell you personally that when I was going through this tough time in my life, I had a therapist say to me, every decision you make from here on out needs to come from your heart. And I can tell you that I've never experienced one person where anything bad has come from the heart. So in all of the hard decisions that I made, I had to turn inward and make the decisions that were coming from my heart. And they were difficult decisions, but this is what the reclaiming is of that attunement. I'm going to also share that, I still have a coaching practice where I coach executives, and I coach some very high-powered women, some women who have made it very far in the corporate construct and are incredibly admirable. And I still have to say to them repeatedly, what do you want to do? They'll be talking about how the corporation wants them to go and take over this market, or how the corporation wants them to take this promotion or consider this. And in talking it through with them, I have to repeat myself and say, wait, okay, but what do you want? What do you need here? So again, it's second nature. It's not second nature for women. What is second nature for women is to please first or to do what's asked of them. And so it all starts with one simple question when you're using your attunement for your own self. And that is, what do I need? Responsibility to yourself is not selfish. It's stabilizing. When we come back into right relationship with ourselves, our entire system shifts. Not because we are forcing things, but it's because we are no longer carrying what doesn't belong to us. So letting go of that glue role doesn't mean that you are withdrawing love. It actually means you're widening it. It means that you get to include yourself again. So imagine that. I think it's a really important thing to think about. One of the things that I have really come to learn is that in the choices that I have made now, living 800 miles away from my kids, my one son is at university, so it's a 7-hour journey, but my other one by car, and my other one lives 800 miles away, my younger one, who's 17. And luckily he lives with his father, and his father takes great care of him. And what I've come to realize, and it was a hope of mine, and it's still bearing itself out, is that I'm loving them in ways that don't feel so obligatory now. They need me in different ways. But when I'm cooking for them now, it's because I really want to, and it's intentional. And I have lots of friends at this age, like, they don't cook for their kids when their kids get older, and all that's fine. I think the question that I want to ask people is, you don't have to solve anything today. You just need to notice where you're over-functioning. And over-functioning, by definition, is doing things that aren't yours to do. And I still think that women are doing that, and many of us do. So just notice where you might be taking on things that aren't yours to take on. Emotional things, where you're filling in gaps that other people actually can fill in. Notice what feels heavy to you. And when you notice that, you start to honor yourself just a little bit more. The other thing I want to say is, when we keep continuing doing things for other people, it's taking up the time and precious energy that we have for ourselves. One of the groups that I talk about in the Live Your Jam philosophy is women at midlife and where to put our precious energy next. And the truth is, every time you continue to do things for others, it's time that you could use for yourself. And if you don't know where to start, you are going to need to get quiet and do some reflection and asking and really think from your heart about what lights you up. And when the answers come, don't judge them. Don't say, oh, I can't do that. Because society has some very specific roles they want us to play. So when the answers come up, just honestly accept them because you'll get lots of insights. So what I want to say is living from the inside out changes the roles that we play, and not by blowing things up, but by telling the truth gently and honestly, by saying, I can no longer do that because I want to do this for myself. I can no longer do that because I want to do this for myself. And I find that the people who love us want to support us. But if we don't take the time out and reclaim it, then people will expect us to continue doing the same thing. And actually, some people aren't going to like this. Some people aren't going to like us saying no. I have a friend, I just went on a hike with her on Monday, and she said to me, Ellen, I don't say yes to anything anymore unless it's a full body yes. And, she is like, if it's not 100% resonating, she's not doing it. So again, no is a complete sentence, but I really think this power that we have, attunement, being so sensitive to what's going on, turn it inward, ladies. You have your own answers. You don't need to solve everything today, but if you're over functioning and you're using that attunement skill, that amazing attunement skill to take care of everybody else, turn it inward. Okay, that's all I have. I think there's so much we can talk about with women. There's so many things going on. There's women who, are in their mid 50s and they're just kind of quitting their marriages and walking out. And I wouldn't put myself in that category. I don't think that was that. Whereas my story is a little bit, could fall into that group. Mine's a little bit different in my opinion. But I do know that women are getting tired of playing the role. And there are a lot of statistics on that men get married right away, and that women aren't getting remarried and they're happy and thriving. And that's just probably a testament, right? Because all of the energy is going to the woman. Now, I'm not espousing, like you blow things up in your life. That's not where I'm coming from at all. As a matter of fact, a lot of people now that I'm divorced come to me and ask me stuff about their marriages. I'm like, where were you people when I was sad? It's funny when you're going through a hard time in your relationship, most often you don't talk about it. I didn't a lot. I was in another country, but it's very private and confusing. And so if any of you are struggling in that way, my heart goes out to you. And again, just turn inward to yourself about what you want. Your heart has the answers. Your soul has the answers. But we all need to get quiet and understand them and not judge ourselves with what those answers are, so we can work from there. So I just promise myself that every day I'm going to make choices that are aligned with my heart. Of course, I'm going to use my head, but my head has gotten me in trouble before because I talk myself out of it. So I'm like, what do I really want here? So I'm going to leave you all with this. What do you really want? Okay, everybody. We'll see you next time on Live Your Jam. Thank you for being with me.